What's up, everyone? Are you ready for some basketball talk? Because, as you know, I'm always ready to spit it. So, today we are going to talk about 2020 free agency, specifically the Toronto Raptors. And with the Toronto Raptors, the conversation today is going to be around how everything they've done in this free agency period has kind of positioned them to be major players, hopefully, at least, in next year's free agency period. We're talking about 2021. Now, let's hop into the video and let's see why that is. The 2020 free agency class was never going to be a class that, was going to reshape the landscape of the NBA. A lot of the players that were available outside of AD, who's very obviously going back to the Lakers, don't come in here with any of that nonsense that, he hasn't re-signed yet. He's re-signing. He's taking his time, but there should be no doubt in anybody's mind that he's going to be right back on the Lakers next season.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Anyways, besides for AD, nobody this year was really going to move the needle on a good team and turn them into a bona fide contender, which is absolutely not the case when it comes to the 2021 class. Depending on a lot of player options in terms of who opts in, who opts out, there is going to be so much potential with next year's class in terms of guys that can do exactly what I was just talking about, that they can take a good team and really push them over the top and turn them into a contender and take the landscape of the NBA and completely flip it on its head. Obviously, for anybody that follows this channel, I have and I will continue to be on the Giannis to Toronto hype train until he re-signs with the Bucks, which hopefully, in a perfect world, at least in my perfect world, that never happens, right?
You gotta believe.
But even if it's not Giannis, there's a couple of other names that you can really look at if you're the Raptors and think, yeah, this guy could really help take this team to the next level. And in order to do that, they've made a lot of kind of sneaky good moves that will help them retain a lot of cap flexibility. And even if, things don't go their way and say Giannis stays with the Bucks, a lot of these guys opt in, the Raptors have positioned themselves to kind of keep going with what they built instead of, just sitting there and being like, crap, well, we have to fill up a roster with Lord knows what, and none of these big names that we thought were going to be available aren't, So with that being said, I want to get into these moves and I want to talk about why I love them so much. The first major move that, came out of Toronto this offseason was obviously Fred VanVleet, which I'm very happy he's back. Honestly, I kind of thought that Fred priced himself out of Toronto. I thought he played so damn well, which he did, and I thought a team honestly, probably the Knicks was going to throw the absolute bag at him, and it was going to be like a max contract or almost a max contract, which would have been too good for Freddie to turn down. So if I'm being completely honest, I thought he was as good as gone. But he's not. He's back at the team, and he's back on what I would say is a pretty team-friendly deal for the Raptors. 4 years, $85 million is honestly not a lot of money to pay for a player of Fred VanVleet's caliber, and a player that I truly think is going to keep getting better until he's, if not an all-star one day, which I do think he is going to be an all-star, he'll be just in that next tier, of guys that are fighting for all-star spots, but never really truly there. But again, if I had to bank on Fred VanVleet becoming an NBA all-star one day, I absolutely would take that. After getting Fred VanVleet back for a very team-friendly deal, they managed to fill up the center void that was left, obviously, by Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka leaving the team. Obviously, two fan favorites, so you hate to see them go, but at the same time, they did a good job of filling up that spot. First of all, they brought in Aron Baynes, who I think is such a sneaky good addition to this team. He can do a lot of what those two guys that just left, being Ibaka and Marc Gasol, can do in terms of he's a very good defender, he's a good rim protector, he even has a decent ability to stretch the court with his jump shot and with his three-point shot. And on top of that as well, for anybody that has ever watched Aron Baynes play, I don't need to tell you this, but for those of you that don't, this guy set some of the hardest and best screens that honestly I have seen in the NBA. It's quite impressive. So it's a great move, whether he's coming off the bench or whether or not he's the starter. Either way, he's a very good piece to have in this rotation. And speaking of good pieces to have in this rotation, Chris Boucher, another guy that they brought back. I have been a fan of how much Boucher has improved over the past few years. I think he's taken a stride every season, much like a lot of the guys with the Raptors, really. I don't think it's unfair to say that the Raptors have some of the best player development coaches in the entire NBA. I would honestly put them at worst top 5, but definitely, in my mind, they're at least top 3. Because guys that come in here that, just start off as like bench pieces or whatever, just constantly keep getting better and better. Obviously, look at Fred, look at Pascal, and I think Boucher you can also throw into the mix there. He's somebody that has gotten better every single year with the Raptors and has really grown his game. And I think he has potential to keep growing his game now that he's gonna get more minutes on the court. But as much as I like these moves in terms of what's gonna give the Raptors with on-court product, let's talk about why I actually really like these moves. For both Aron Baynes and for Chris Boucher, the second years on their contracts are both not guaranteed. They're both team options, which means if the Raptors want to get out from these contracts, which Baynes, I believe, was 2 years, $14.3 million, and Boucher was 2 years, $13.5, they can get out of them in that second season if they want to, take those contracts off the books and pursue a max player like I've been talking about. So it's genius because, say, if Giannis is on the board when it comes to free agency next season, or hell, if Kawhi's on the board, or if Paul George is on the board, whoever it is, you can get out of these contracts and you can create that max slot. But if they're not, and if things kind of stay put the way they are and next year's free agency class isn't as good as you thought it would be, you take the team option and you take 2 good, valuable contributors to your rotation and you bring them back. The other 2 moves that they've made so far that are of note are, again, sneaky good is the perfect expression. DeAndre Bembry for 2 years, $4 million. Second year, much like the centers, team option, not guaranteed. Perfect. You get a guy that you can potentially grow within your system and you can turn into a great bench piece. And if you don't like what you're seeing, or again, if you want to pursue the max free agent, you don't pick up his option and you take him off the books. Alex Len, 1 year, $2.3 million. You take a chance on a guy that's been decent, in case Baynes or Boucher or whoever isn't working out when it comes to that center position, or whether or not you just want to play some bigger lineups and you want to get Alex Len in the game. He's a potentially decent piece, and again, he's on the books for 1 year, so it's nothing too serious. So, with all that being said, you can kind of see how all these moves that the Raptors have made have kind of been with foresight to 2021 and to getting ready to pursue that player that will really change this team. Obviously, I think the Raptors are banking on the fact that Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam are both going to come back better next season. And considering that these 2 guys, plus Norm Powell, I believe, would be the only contracts that are on the books, it's fairly simple and it's fairly easy to see how this team can just turn around and go pursue somebody that's a game-changing talent. There's a lot of potential here to move Norman Powell if you want to. I mean, he's such a good bench piece, I think, that I wouldn't want to see him go. But again, if you're creating that max spot, it might not be a bad idea to send him packing, especially because I think after the season he had last year and after what I'm going to anticipate is going to be another good season, Norman Powell is a fairly easy player to move. And I think you can definitely get some decent draft compensation or whatever the case may be for Norman Powell to take that money off the books as well. So that will leave you with literally only Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam being the only guaranteed contracts on the books at the time, which creates the max slot for the player. Now, I've been talking about the max slot a lot. I've been talking about game-changing talents a lot. So let's dive into who are some of the big headlining names in 2021. The big one here is super obvious, and again, I've talked about it in this video. I have a whole video dedicated to this, so I won't get super into it, but I'm obviously gonna get into it. Giannis. Giannis is still the crown jewel of the 2021 free agency class. He is very obviously one of the 3 best players in basketball, and he's still young as hell too, just hitting his prime. So if you secure Giannis, you pretty much secure your future. He is going to be somebody that's going to keep you in contention by himself, which he won't have to, mind you, but by himself, Giannis on a roster is going to keep you in contention for an NBA championship. Assuming that Milwaukee has another bad year, they underachieve, And Giannis realizes, shit.
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 What are you doing up, little miss?
Shit.
Nope.
I can't win in Milwaukee, and decides to test the free agency market. The Raptors have got to look as good a destination as any in terms of how well run the organization is, how great the coaching is, how great the situation is in terms of filling up pieces that will specifically complement the big three in that case, which is going to be Giannis, Pascal, and Fred VanVleet. There's so much room here for the Raptors to really build a contender if they get Giannis at the forefront of it. Let's look at some of the other big names on the market. Now, I'm going to gloss over this one because, again, he's going back to the team that he's on. LBJ does have a player option where he could opt out. But even if he did opt out for whatever reason, which, like, literally I think it's a 0.1% chance that he would opt out, I don't see him coming to Toronto as much as I would personally love to see LBJ in a Raptors jersey. That would be, like, my favorite thing in my closet if I could get it, but it's not happening. But the other two kind of big names that you could look at here, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Now, obviously, Paul George's stock is down right now in terms of, what the NBA circle perceives of him, but Paul George is not a bad player by any means. And Paul George is a player that if you add him to the team, like the Raptors, where hopefully he buys into the fact that he's not the guy, but he's one of the main guys, he can honestly be a piece that takes the Raptors and puts them into contention in the East. But now, obviously, the other big piece here is Kawhi. And it's going to be real awkward, isn't it, right? You get there, and Kawhi Leonard sits there, let's say after the Clippers once again underachieve, and he realizes that he's like, crap, I don't think I can win with the Clippers. And let's say Kawhi Leonard sits down and really thinks about, well, what do I value more? Being at home, being around family, or being on a winning team? And if he decides that being on a winning team is more important to him, why wouldn't the Raptors try to lure him back? These two sides have already proven that they can win together, and Kawhi's biggest, well, I don't know if it was his biggest, but one of the things that kind of came out when Kawhi left the Raptors was Kawhi didn't think they were in a position to repeat, which is why he ended up leaving for the Clippers, rather. So, he's seen what the Raptors have looked like without him, and he's seen that in the first year, they managed to pretty much stay consistent. They managed to put together a decent run on that season without having a true superstar on that team. And in the second season, let's just assume things go fairly well because it's the Raptors. I think it's a safe assumption. Let's say they put together another competitive season, and Kawhi's all of a sudden sitting there like, man, I messed up. Maybe I want to go back to Toronto. I know there might still be some sour feelings in terms of, oh, he left us after a championship. But I would personally welcome him back with arms wide open. I'm pretty sure Masai would as well. Because you add Kawhi Leonard back to this Raptors team, and I don't know if they're the best team in the East. I think they probably would be, depending on what Kawhi looked like at that point. But even if they're not the best team in the East, they're one of the best teams in the East if you add Kawhi Leonard to the mix. So I know some Raptors fans might not want to hear that, but I don't think it's a possibility you should totally rule out. I don't think it's the likeliest thing in the world. I do think, Lord knows what Kawhi actually thinks, but I do think he values playing at home a lot. But if the Clippers are bad enough this season that it leads to both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George considering that they want to play elsewhere, Kawhi going back to Toronto, honestly, I think is a situation that makes a lot of sense for both sides, really. And outside of those major players, let's talk about some of the other kind of smaller names, but names that you definitely want to consider if you're the Raptors. Obviously, Kyle Lowry is going to be one of the players that's coming off the books. Ideally, you're going to be getting him back, but at lesser money. But obviously, in a perfect world, you sign your max free agent and then you use your bird rights to re-sign Kyle Lowry, so you can do both. But Obviously, if you don't get one of these top guys, bring back Kyle, I'm sure is going to be top priority. You can look at a guy like Rudy Gobert as well, who's, I think, a fantastic role player and one of the best role players in basketball, but obviously he's not a perfect fit in terms of he really lacks any kind of value on the offensive end outside of rim running and finishing around the basket from somebody setting him up, and I think the Raptors really like their shooting, so I think they would pass on Rudy Gobert. But two of the other names you might want to look at are Victor Oladipo and Drew Holiday are both going to be free agents. And obviously, maybe Drew stays in Milwaukee with Giannis, whatever the case there. But if Drew and Oladipo are available, I think those are two guys that you would happily plug into, the combo, not the combo guard spot, sorry, the 2 spot beside Freddie, assuming that Kyle Lowry at that point is ready to play a bench role on a team, assuming he declines a little bit. Obviously, I'm assuming a lot here, but Oladipo and Drew Holiday are definitely names that you would look at as well. Obviously, they're not as flashy as some of the top names in this free agency class, but they're definitely players that you stick them on the Raptors beside Pascal, you stick them on the Raptors beside Fred VanVleet, and you have a contending team. I know that was a lot to take in, and that's kind of the point. The Raptors have put themselves in a position where the future is going to be very interesting. There's plenty of potential here that 2021 is going to be one of the biggest off seasons in franchise history. And I think Masai knows that. I think Nick Nurse probably knows that. I think pretty much everybody in this Raptors organization knows that and is banking on that. So you know what? I personally am super excited with everything they've done this offseason. I assume any other moves that they're going to be doing are going to be along the same lines of what they've done in terms of trying to maintain cap flexibility and hope for the absolute best in terms of who's going to be on the board when it comes to the 21 or free agency class. And yeah, honestly, this is an exciting time to be a Raptors fan. Next season might not be the most competitive season that we've had, but I think the offseason after that is going to be one of the most exciting that we've ever had. That does it for me today. What did you folks think? Do you like what the Raptors are doing this offseason? Obviously, I certainly do, but I love to hear other opinions, so obviously, comment below. Let me know what you think. Do you think the Raptors are doing everything in their power to, position themselves as well as they can, or would you have liked to have seen them do other moves this offseason / whatever the case may be, trade up in the draft? I don't know. Either way, let me know in the comment section. Obviously, like the video, share it if you can. I super appreciate it every time you folks do that. And yeah, that's going to do it for me today. I am out of